This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. Hey, what's up, and welcome to Q&A, the show where I take your question and answer them here in video format. Always a fun thing to do, take your questions. First question comes from Xbox. I don't know if that's an intentional set of letters behind that Xbox, I'm gonna be honest with you. How many more games of Deshaun Watson playing like week 1 and 3 until we start considering a backup quarterback? If you're the Cleveland Browns, here's how I would view it. You have some time to be flexible as long as you win games within the next few weeks. But once you get past that Philadelphia game, you got to be locked into whatever you're doing for the rest of the season. So if it's going to be Deshaun Watson, it's got to be locked in on him, and you got to do whatever you got to do to feel like you can get the quarterback play you need out of him. But honestly, for me, I need to see him demonstrate that he can play to the level that we expect him to play at a consistent point before I would even be comfortable doing that, right? Like, I think you really need to have an evaluation of if you can trust Deshaun Watson to play at the bare minimum level that we have talked about, right? The Stefanski standard of quarterback play that we've seen Jacoby Brissett get to, that we've seen Joe Flacco fresh off the couch, I would like to remind folks, be able to get to, right? That we have seen plenty of other quarterbacks in a game or two been able to get to in the Kevin Stefanski era. If he has not demonstrated that he can do that by the time you get into the division games, you got to have a serious conversation about if this is what's best for the team going forward, because you have a good idea that you can get that out of a Jameis Winston, given what you've gotten out of dudes like Jacoby Brissett and then like 38-year-old off the couch Joe Flacco before, right? Like, you should have a good idea that that's something that's capable if Deshaun is not. So that's the determination. The reason I will wait till then is because you have some time to figure things out. And I understand. I'm trying to be understanding of the situation that the Browns are in. Deshaun Watson is an expensive quarterback on an expensive contract that you have spent a lot of resources to bring in. And you want to give it as much as a chance as you can give it without sacrificing the season at the same time. Now, if the play dips below what it was week 3, week 1, or even week 2, right, and it gets to the point to where, like, it is undeniable that he is a detriment to this team, then you got to do something immediate. It's not gotten to that point yet, right? We're still debating whether he should be benched or not. But if it doesn't improve significantly in the next few weeks, I think you have to have that conversation. Or if it degrades even further within the next few weeks or the next few quarters, you might have to just do it and deal with the awkwardness of it. So that is kind of just what it is, right? It's not a perfect solution. I know that there's some people who feel like you should just pull the plug now. There's some people who think that you should wait to the bye week. There's some people who think you should just wait out the whole season and see what happens. But I don't think that that's an option. I don't think you just give Deshaun the whole season and just see what happens if he's not playing very well at all. So that is where I'm at with it. Thank you for the question. Let me get the next one. Chris Gustafaro. Hey, Q, do you think Kevin going 0 for 4 on the West Coast is just a coincidence? I don't think it's a coincidence, but I don't think it's exclusive to Kevin Stefanski. Most coaches, most teams struggle on West Coast trips. And that's pretty basic why it happens. I mean, West Coast trips are hard. Like, playing in a different time zone than the time zone that you live in and operate off of is difficult. It's one of the biggest advantages in all of sports, especially a sport like football, where you're not traveling as frequently as you are in baseball or basketball. Like, your body clock is super important. Football players tend to be really strict on what they do at specific times, so it can throw off your routine. Like, West Coast trips are just hard. In general, it's the same way on the opposite end, right? West Coast team coming to the East Coast, there's always a buff there for the home team. So I don't think this is a Kevin Stefanski thing. This is just what it is when it comes to an East Coast team traveling across 3 time zones to play a football game in a week. It's just going to be difficult to do because it's difficult in general. So it's kind of my thoughts about it. But yeah, it's not a coincidence. It's not just Kevin, though. I think this is universal. It's just difficult. Justin says, with all the issues on offense, I keep seeing people call to go back to what Stefanski knows. Is that a feasible option? I personally think they need to see out the new offense, and maybe Stefanski doesn't feel comfortable with the setting up plays. Offense and Dorsey might be a switch worth be exploring. Hopefully, they get it turned around before the season slips away. I don't think the issue is that they're in a new offense. I think there's ways to tweak some things around the corner always to make them a little bit better to fit what you have now. But I think the issue is the execution from the quarterback position in the new offense. I've seen guys be open. I've seen space be created. I've seen opportunities for big time plays. But the problem is you're not getting that execution from the quarterback position. So I don't think this is necessarily like, oh, they need to go back to what works with Stefanski. I think if you went back to the old offense with Kevin, right, you're going to have the same issues because it's not going to make Deshaun process faster. It's not going to make Deshaun trust his wide receivers and throw with anticipation. It's not going to fix the problems that the Browns are having offensively because the problems are just bigger than what plays you're calling. The problems are about the execution of those play calls, and the problems are there with the quarterback position, unfortunately. The next question comes from Mr. Green, who says, who, if anyone, is realistic trade option for Barry and company trying to get some help on the offensive line? I don't think the Browns' solution to fix the offensive line will be to trade for somebody. And I don't think I would advocate for that, to be honest with you, right? Because what I don't want the Browns to do is to make a panic decision during the trade deadline, trade for a player for more than they normally would, and pay that player more than they normally would just to get them here right now and put a Band-Aid on the situation, and then kind of be stuck with that player for the next few years. And it kind of put them in an awkward spot. I would rather they try to fix what they have with what they got. And let's be real here. Like, the Browns have a lot of ways to fix this thing with the offensive line. We've seen them get quality, well, not quality, but good enough offensive line play with James Hudson and Garon Christian playing left and right tackle, right? Something to me suggests that if you pull the right levers and you play the right way, you can minimize the damage that the offensive line struggling is going to do to the team overall. And I think it's more about figuring that out than it is about trying to hope that a new player is the solution. I think you should find those solutions within the system. And honestly, with the personnel that you have, right, when you get Jed Wills back, hopefully you get Jack Conklin back soon. And that could be a solution there. But even with those guys back, we've seen them struggle. We just need to figure out how to adjust using those players to put them in a better situation to win, because it's possible to get more out of them than what you're getting out of them right now. I think we're just not having a great, we're not doing great at utilizing that. The next question comes from Mitchell, who says, not really a question, but it seems like the O-line hasn't been as bad as everybody wants to assume based on tape. Watson is missing guys, not reading the field. Well, is that a fair takeaway? I would say it's fair enough, especially given the expectation for Deshaun Watson, right? You expected Deshaun Watson to be somebody when you traded for him that could elevate talent, that you weren't going to have guys run wide open, and be super open in order for him to get the ball to him. Like, the more and more we have these conversations about Deshaun Watson, the more and more it sounds like conversations that you would have about a rookie quarterback or a quarterback on a rookie deal. But I would like to remind people, Deshaun Watson's not on a rookie deal. He is on a expensive franchise quarterback deal. Deshaun Watson is not rookie quarterback aged. He's 30. He's made 3 Pro Bowls. He's had an elite season before, right? Like, he should be doing these things. It's not like we're trying to develop him into somebody who could do these things. He should be doing these things. He's done these things in the past, and it's concerning that he's not doing it because it suggests that he's just not physically capable or mentally capable of doing those things at that level anymore. Like, throwing with anticipation, look at the Deshaun Watson 2020 tape and tell me he needs to see a wide receiver be open. But you watch this 2024 tape and people have to make the excuse that the wide receiver's not all the way open. But I saw Deshaun Watson throw people open in 2020. Why is he not capable of doing that in 2024? I'm not even asking him to do it at the same rate, but still just be able to do it at all. He's not been able to do it. There's a lot of regression there with Watson this year that's really unfortunate and really hurting the team. We'll see how this goes on for the rest of the season. If he's going to be the starter, you would hope he plays better going forward. But right now, I mean, like, as of week 3, it's not been great. And I think it has made and exacerbated problems that already exist on the offensive line. Not to say that the offensive line is great and Deshaun Watson's making them awful, right? But just to say that the offensive line is probably like mid-tier, probably like lower, like probably like the 20th ranked defense. I think they're 20th in pass blocking efficiency. So they're not the worst offensive line in the NFL, but they're closer to the middle of the pack. They shouldn't look like this. They should look a little bit better than this, even with the injuries. And I think they're looking like this because we're compounding problems on top of other problems that are also creating more problems. And that's an issue, right? The next question comes from Tris Charles, who says, if the offense continues to perform at its current rate, how many games will it take for the Browns to cut ties with Ken Dorsey? I would hate for Ken Dorsey to be a patsy for what is obviously underwhelming quarterback play. Like, this is not on Ken Dorsey. Like, any offensive coordinator would struggle to have an offense. It kind of reminds me of how, like, Todd Monken had to take the fall for the Browns in 2019. But when you look at it, it's like, yeah, he wasn't perfect for Baker Mayfield at that time, but also Baker wasn't playing well either, right? So, no, I would say that Ken Dorsey shouldn't be the guy who takes the fall here. I think this is Watson, man. Like, he's just not playing good. It's okay to admit that. P Money says, if Watson all of a sudden starts playing like a top 5 QB again, probably won't, but entertain me. Do we still look at a potential replacement to stick with them and DTR in the room? Even if we get elite play, I'm not sure if I would trust it year over year. Yeah, that's exactly where I'm at with Watson. Like, I'm looking at this Watson deal as best case scenario, he plays out that contract and we're done. I don't trust that he will be good, even if he plays good, after the length of this contract. Right? So I would, like, I've said this even before the season started. I think the Browns should, like, consider drafting a quarterback this year or next year, regardless of how Watson plays. I think the Browns should always consider bringing in quarterbacks because Watson's not going to be the last quarterback to ever play for the Cleveland Browns. And it's looking like he's going to have a reign that's going to be at most this length of this contract, if not shorter than that. So, yeah, I would definitely, even if he plays elite, like he wins the MVP, I would still draft somebody because I would rather be prepared for that kind of situation than be caught off guard by it when there's been a lot of evidence that suggests that you shouldn't be caught off guard by it. Next question comes from Dog Pound D, who says, if you were the coach and the first quarter of this game looks like last week, are you benching for the first quarter? No, I'm not going to bench him after one quarter. That would be a bit extreme. I would give him until, like, if I were the coach, I would make the decision once you come back from the road trip. I know that's an answer that's going to frustrate some people who want to make a decision right now on Watson, but I would give him at least the 3 games on the road trip to try to correct what was a very underwhelming start to the season, because at the end of the day, he is still being paid a lot and he's still on paper he should be talented enough to do what you need from the quarterback position just to hit your bare minimums on offense. So you want to give him that time to at least do that. But if it's not happening after that Philadelphia game and then you get into your division slate, or if this thing devolves to a point to where you go like 1-2 or anything less than, or if this thing like devolves to a point to where you like just drop your next 2 games or something like that, then you might have to make the move in Philly. Or if you drop a game next week and then like in the first half, it looks like you're clearly about to drop that game against the Commanders too, then you might need to make a change here. But I'll give him the opportunity the next couple of weeks, as long as he plays at a level to where the Browns can win around with, or just to see what he has left in him, because it has only been 3 games, right? I don't want to be too quick to make a decision, but these 3 games just have been the opposite of encouraging. So I'm not confident that he's going to prove something, but I still want to give him the opportunity to prove something because I think that's fair. The next question comes from Mr. Camtastic. Hey, who do you like between Shedeur, Quinn Ewers, Cam Ward, Carson Beck, Jalen Milroe? I've seen a lot of Shedeur Sanders. I'm not as sold on Shedeur. Like, my issue with Shedeur Sanders is that I have not seen him play against a really good college football defense and have a really good game. Like, I'm trying to think. In the Pac-12, when he went up against those good defenses, he really struggled. This year, he played against Nebraska, who I don't even think are a great defense college football-wise, but really struggled against Nebraska. You know, like, I wish Shedeur, that's the big concern. I know there's a lot of hype around him, but the concern is like the quality of opponents that he looks good against. He looks good against Colorado State. He looks good against Baylor, which was a 3-win team that only beat the 2 teams coming out of the American and a FCS team that they scheduled. And then he looked good against a actual FCS team in North Dakota State. And also, like, his Jackson State tape looks fine, but it's Jackson State. Like, you're playing in a SWAC, which is not even as good as the rest of the FCS there. So the quality of opponent that he's looked good at in his career, it just hasn't been up to snuff. Like, he played Oregon last year, looked awful against Oregon. This year he looked awful against Nebraska. Like, at some point, we got to treat Shedeur like every other prospect in the draft and actually demand that he plays well versus really good teams consistently, because that is the biggest red flag for him to me. It's like, hey, who has he played well against? Also, like, when he played in big games at Jackson State, he wasn't good in those big games, which is a concern. Now, unfortunately, he's been Colorado's been so bad that he hasn't been able to play any big games in Colorado. I think he did play well against TCU last year in the opener, but remember, TCU ended up being one of the worst teams in the country and one of the worst defenses in the country last year. So it ended up being fool's gold. I know TCU was ranked early on, but then they kind of dropped pretty quickly after that. Yeah, that's the issue with Colorado and with Shedeur for me in the evaluation, is that I've seen him play a lot of football, and it makes sense that somebody who's played as much football as he does looks good against some bad college teams. He really should be at that point. But has he ever looked great against a great team, a great defense? That answer is the concern with Shedeur, right? Quinn Ewers, I just don't love the skill set of Quinn Ewers. But I have to watch more of him. Admittedly, I haven't watched a ton of Quinn Ewers. I've only watched the 2 big games he's had at Texas. Cam Ward, I haven't seen him play that much. Carson Beck, I have to see him play more. Jalen Milroe, I like Jalen Milroe. I think I'm on Jalen Milroe Island. I don't think there's a lot of people on this island with me, but I see a young player who's raw, that if you put him in a system with Kevin Stefanski and you sit him for a couple of years, you might be able to get a lot out of that if you just take your time and develop a dude like Milroe. I think the talent is there. I think he's shown some stuff against some really good competition, right? Like, it's interesting to me that Jalen Milroe has had great games versus great defenses in the SEC. Now, he's playing on Alabama, so that's a bit of a boost here. But, you know, Shedeur has great wide receivers there at Colorado. So the same thing is theoretically possible for him too, right? We're talking about Travis Hunter being a top 5 pick. And like I've seen Jalen Milroe do that against elite defenses, but it seems like more people are leaning towards Shedeur, which like there might be a reason for that. I have to watch more Shedeur, like as a film analyst, not as like somebody who's just casually watching games, because I did watch a ton of them at Jackson State, especially. But when I see Shedeur and I see Jalen Milroe, I think that the way that they're portrayed is really interesting because Jalen Milroe does not get a lot of credit for playing against some really good competition, but Shedeur gets a lot of credit for playing against some really weak competition. I think is, I wonder if that's a sound way to evaluate him. Let's see. Mr. Camtastic says, "Oh, he got 2 in. You snuck 2 in, huh?" Oh man. Mr. Camtastic says, "I remember your first video breaking down Watson in Houston. I'm probably just as confused by his fall off as you are. Though I didn't think he was great coming out. He proved me wrong. Do you think him never being a great pre-snap QB led to his huge regression?" See, I don't think Watson was ever a bad pre-snap QB. I think he's just not a rhythm and timing quarterback. He's not somebody who does well when their footwork has to dictate when they get rid of the ball. He's always been, at least in Houston, a strong pre-snap guy. He was the same in Clemson. Like Watson's success in the NFL and in college was about his cerebral abilities as well as his athletic abilities and arm talent, right? He was never really super spectacular as an athlete or as a thrower of the football, but cerebral, his mind was in Houston. In Cleveland, there's been flashes of that, but he's never demonstrated the ability to do that as consistently as he did in Houston. And I think he's just somebody who's been a victim of the too high revolution more than anything. Like he really thrived on being able to open teams up and throw downfield. Now that he can't do that, the way that he has to process is different, and he's just not as good at that. You add in that he's older, right? Like he's 4 years older than he was in 2020. So you're talking about somebody being 26 versus 29. It's a significant difference of age. It's a whole college career, right, of age that has happened with him too since then. And I think all of those things have taken its toll to make him a shell of himself, unfortunately. But that's it for Q&A. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.